In the bustling heart of Chicago's South Side, where the skyline of gleaming skyscrapers seemed like a distant dream, James Carter had once been just another kid scraping by in the shadows of towering projects. Born in 1980 to a single mother who worked double shifts as a nurse, James grew up in a world where opportunity was as scarce as fresh air on a humid summer night. The streets were alive with the rhythm of survivakids playing basketball on cracked courts, the distant wail of sirens blending with the laughter of neighbors sharing meals on stoops. But for James, at the tender age of 8, life was a constant battle against the weight of expectations that society had already pinned on him because of the color of his skin. His mother, Airline Carter, was his anchor. A fierce woman with calloused hands and eyes that sparkled with unyielding determination, she would often sit with young James at their tiny kitchen table, the scent of collard greens simmering on the stove filling the air. "Son," she'd say, her voice steady like the Mississippi River she dreamed of one day seeing, "the world might try to tell you where you belong, but you decide that. You rise above it with your head high and your heart full." Those words weren't just advice, they were her legacy. Forged in the fires of the civil rights movement she had witnessed as a child in the 1960s, Airline had marched in spirit with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., even if she was too young to hold a sign, and she passed that fire to James like a sacred torch. School was James's escape and his proving ground. In an underfunded public school where textbooks were outdated and teachers stretched thin, James excelled. He devoured books on aviation, fascinated by the idea of planes soaring above the barriers of the ground. One day, "Mom," he'd tell her, his eyes wide with wonder as he pored over a library book about the Wright brothers. "I'm gonna build something that takes people higher than they've ever been," but excellence came with its own shadows. Whispers from classmates, subtle exclusions from study groups, and even a teacher once suggesting he stick to basketball instead of dreaming of engineering. James felt the sting of prejudice early, like a paper cut that bled slowly but deeply. Yet, Elena's words echoed, "Rise above." By high school, James had earned a scholarship to a prestigious prep school on the North Side, a world away from his roots. The transition was jarring, suddenly surrounded by kids in pressed uniforms whose parents drove luxury cars. He faced the invisible walls of class and race head-on. "You're out of your league here," Carter, one boy sneered during a group project on American history. James bit back the retort, channeling his anger into straight A's and a part-time job at a local airport, washing planes under the watchful eye of an old mechanic named Gus. Gus, a grizzled veteran of the Korean War, saw potential in the kid. "Aviation ain't about where you come from, boy," Gus would grunt as they polished fuselages under the harsh fluorescent lights. "It's about knowing how to handle turbulence." Those late nights fueled James's ambition. He graduated valedictorian, his speech a quiet manifesto on breaking barriers, drawing applause that echoed his mother's proud tears. College at MIT was the real crucible. Funded by scholarships and loans, James majored in aerospace engineering, but the doubts followed him like exhaust fumes. Professors who overlooked his raised hand, classmates who assumed he was there on affirmative action rather than merit. One particularly brutal incident came during a group presentation on airline logistics. A fellow student, a privileged kid from Connecticut, dismissed James's innovative fuel efficiency model as unrealistic for someone like you. The room fell silent, but James stood tall. "Someone like me," he replied coolly, his voice steady. "You mean someone who's actually lived the realities of cost-cutting in underserved communities." That's exactly why this model works. He aced the project, but the encounter left a scare reminder that success didn't erase bias, it often amplified it. After graduation, James's path twisted through corporate America. He landed an entry-level job at a major airline, crunching numbers in a cubicle that smelled of stale coffee and ambition. Promotions were slow. He watched white colleagues leapfrog him despite equal qualifications. "It's not personal," his boss once said, avoiding eye contact. "It's just how things are," but James knew better. He networked relentlessly, attending industry conferences where he was often the only black face in the room. In 2008, during the financial crisis, he saw his chance. Laid off from the big airline, he pooled his savings and launched Sky High Aviation, a small charter service targeting underserved routes in the Midwest. "We're gonna fly where others won't," he told his tiny team of 3, including Elena, who handled the books from her kitchen table. The early years were brutal. James flew the planes himself, dodging bankruptcy and skeptical investors who questioned a young black entrepreneur in a white-dominated industry, but his vision prevailed. Sky High expanded, securing contracts with major corporations and innovating with eco-friendly routes that appealed to a growing market. By 2015, the company went public and James became a billionaire at 35. Forbes dubbed him the Sky King, but to him, it was validation of Elena's words. He bought her a house in a quiet suburb, far from the projects, and visited every Sunday, sharing stories of boardroom battles won. Now, at 45, James Carter was the undisputed CEO of Sky High Airlines, one of America's top carriers, with a fleet of over 200 planes and routes spanning the globe. His office in the company's sleek Chicago headquarters overlooked Lake Michigan, a symbol of how far he'd come. But success hadn't softened him, it had sharpened his resolve. Divorced 5 years earlier from his college sweetheart amicably but painfully after the demands of his career strained their marriage, James poured his energy into raising his son, Ethan. At 10 years old, Ethan was a mirror of his father, bright-eyed, curious, with a mop of curly hair and a laugh that could light up the darkest room. James had fought for full custody, determined to be the father he never had growing up. Their bond was the cornerstone of James's life. Mornings began with breakfast at the kitchen island of their modern loft apartment in downtown Chicago, where floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city lights. "What's on the agenda today, champ?" James would ask, pouring Ethan's favorite cereal Cap'n Crunch with extra marshmallows. Ethan, already dressed in his school uniform, would rattle off his schedule, math quiz, soccer practice, and homework on the solar system. But James always wove in lessons beyond the books. "Remember, Ethan," he'd say, his deep voice warm yet firm, "knowledge is power, but character is what keeps you flying straight." Ethan idolized his dad. At school, a diverse magnet academy where kids from all backgrounds mingled, he was the top student, earning straight A's without breaking a sweat. His passion for aviation mirrored James's. He'd spend hours building model planes from kits, dreaming of one day co-piloting with his father. But James made sure to ground those dreams in reality. Evenings were for history hours, where they'd curl up on the couch with documentaries or books about American icons. "See this, son." James would point to a photo of Rosa Parks on the bus. "She didn't back down because someone said she didn't belong. That's the Carter way, stand tall, no matter what." One crisp autumn evening in September 2025, as the leaves turned gold outside their window, James decided it was time for a milestone. Ethan had just aced his latest report card A's with a special project on aerodynamics that impressed even his teacher. "You've earned this, buddy," James announced over dinner. Grilled salmon and steamed broccoli, Ethan's least favorite but a healthy staple. "We're going to New York, first class, just you and me. A father-son adventure." Ethan's eyes lit up like runaway lights. "Really, Dad? First class, like with the big seats and hot towels?" James chuckled, ruffling his son's hair. "Exactly. And on the way, we'll talk about what it means to soar above the clouds, sand the doubters below." The preparation was meticulous, a reflection of James's executive precision. He booked Flight 5 to 9 from Chicago's O'Hare to JFK, ensuring Ethan had the window seat in first class to A, to be exact. James chose seat 5B, a few rows back, deliberately. "This is your trip, Ethan," he explained as they packed. "I want you to feel independent, like a big kid handling the world." Ethan nodded solemnly, stuffing his backpack with a model plane, a journal, and his favorite book on Amelia Earhart. But James slipped in a subtle lesson. If anyone questions you, remember what Grandma Elena always said: your seat is yours because you earned it. And no one can take that away. The night before the flight, James couldn't sleep. Lying in his king-sized bed, the city humming below, he reflected on his own first flight, a cramped economy seat to a job interview in Dallas, where he'd been grilled not just on qualifications but on fitting in with the corporate culture. He'd landed the job, but the memory lingered. Now, giving Ethan this experience felt like passing the baton. "He's ready," James whispered to himself, staring at the ceiling. Stronger than I was at his age. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of September day in Chicago that promised adventure. James and Ethan arrived at O'Hare International Airport with time to spare, the terminal a whirlwind of travelers, families rushing to gates, business people tapping on laptops, and the constant announcements echoing like a symphony of motion. Ethan gripped his backpack strap, eyes darting to the massive departure boards and the planes visible through the windows. "Dad, look at that one. It's a Boeing 787 Dreamliner, right?" James smiled proudly. "You got it, Ace. That's the kind we fly at Sky High." As they checked in at the Sky High counter, the agenta young woman named Mary recognized James immediately. "Mr. Carter, welcome aboard. We've got everything set for you and your son." Her deference was professional, but James waved it off casually. "Just James today, Maria. And make sure my boy's treated like royalty." Ethan beamed, feeling the thrill of the moment. They breezed through security, James's priority status smoothing the way, though he made a point to chat with the TSA officer about the weather, treating everyone with the respect he demanded for himself. With boarding passes in hand, Ethan clutching his like a treasure map, they headed to the first-class lounge. Plush seats, complimentary breakfast buffets, and the hum of quiet conversations enveloped them. Ethan dove into a plate of pancakes, syrup dripping as he chattered about what New York would hold, the Statue of Liberty, maybe a Yankees game. James sipped coffee, his mind already drifting to the flight. He knew the skies could be unpredictable, just like life. But as he watched his son laugh, James felt a surge of hope. This trip wasn't just a reward, it was a foundation, building Ethan's wings for whatever storms lay ahead. Little did they know, the real turbulence was waiting not in the clouds, but in the cabin of Flight 5-9. As the boarding call echoed, Sky High Airlines Flight 5-9 to New York JFK, now boarding first class. James placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Ready to fly, son?" Ethan nodded, his small hand slipping into his father's. "Ready, Dad." "Let's go." The grand expanse of Chicago's O'Hare International Airport buzzed with the chaotic symphony of modern travel on that crisp September morning in 2025. It was a place where dreams took off and anxieties lingered like exhaust fumes, a sprawling labyrinth of glass and steel that symbolized America's relentless pursuit of connection. Overhead, massive digital screens flashed departure times, while the air hummed with announcements in multiple languages, echoing through the cavernous terminals. Travelers from every corner of the globe converged here. Families hauling overstuffed suitcases, harried business executives barking into Bluetooth earpieces, and wide-eyed tourists snapping selfies with the airport's iconic neon sign. The scent of fresh-baked pretzels from a nearby stand mingled with the sterile tang of air conditioning, creating an intoxicating blend that screamed gateway to the world. For 10-year-old Ethan Carter, O'Hare was a wonderland straight out of his aviation fantasies. His small hand clutched the strap of his backpack as he trailed behind his father, eyes darting like a hawk spotting prey. "Dad, look at that gate over there. It's for international flights. Do you think we'll ever go to Europe on Sky High?" Ethan's voice bubbled with excitement, cutting through the din. James smiled down at him, his tailored navy suit impeccable despite the early hour, a subtle nod to his executive life. At 45, James carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had conquered the skies, but moments like this reminded him why he did it all, for the pure joy in his son's face. They moved through the throng with practiced ease, James's priority status granting them access to the fast-track lanes. Security at O'Hare, still shadowed by the ghosts of 9/11s, was a ritual of vigilance, shoes off, laptops out, liquids in clear bags. Ethan fidgeted as he emptied his pockets, placing his model plane a sleek miniature of a sky-high Boeing Ginto the gray bin. "Don't worry, champ," James reassured him, his deep voice a calming anchor. "This is just the ground check before we really take off." The TSA officer, a middle-aged man with a no-nonsense demeanor, gave them a cursory glance and waved them through. James always made a point to thank the staff. He knew the unsung heroes behind the scenes were the backbone of any operation, much like the ground crew that kept his airline soaring. As they emerged into the main concourse, Ethan's pace quickened. The terminal was a microcosm of American diversity, a group of Somali immigrants in colorful hijabs chatting animatedly, a Latino family sharing churros from a vendor cart, and clusters of Midwesterners in flannel shirts heading to Florida escapes. Billboards towered above, advertising everything from luxury cruises to the latest iPhone, but Ethan's gaze locked onto the sky-high promotions. "Fly the friendly skis with Sky High, every journey soars," blared one, featuring a diverse cast of passengers beaming from plush first-class seats. Ethan pointed eagerly. "That's us today, Dad, we're gonna be just like them," James chuckled, but his phone vibrated in his pocket, a reminder that even on a family trip, the world of business never fully paused. He glanced at the screen, an incoming call from his CFO, Rebecca Klein, marked urgent. "Go ahead and explore the lounge, Ethan. I'll catch up in a minute." Ethan nodded, scampering toward the escalator with the enthusiasm of youth, while James stepped aside near a quiet gate, pressing the phone to his ear. "Rebecca, talk to me. What's the fire?" On the other end, Rebecca's voice was clipped, laced with the tension of high-stakes deals. "James, the board's buzzing about the Delta merger talks. We've got a window to acquire their regional routes, but the regulators are sniffing around antitrust issues. If we don't counter their proposal by noon, we lose leverage." James paced slowly, his mind racing through numbers and strategies. Sky High had grown from a scrappy startup to a powerhouse, but mergers like this could catapult them to the top tier or sink them in red tape. Pull the legal team in for a virtual huddle. Emphasize our community outreach programs. That plays well with the diversity mandates. And loop in the PR folks, span it as expansion for underserved markets. He paused, glancing at Ethan waving from the lounge entrance. "We'll finalize when I land in New York." "Keep it tight." Hanging up, James felt the familiar pull of responsibility. At the pinnacle of his career, with a net worth north of $3 billion and features in Forbes as the aviation visionary, he could have delegated more. But James thrived on the front lines. It was how he'd bootstrapped Sky High from a single prop plane in a dusty hangar to a fleet dominating Midwest skies. The divorce from his ex-wife, Sarah, had only intensified that drivelosing shared custody battles had made him vow to be an even better father, blending work and family like fuel and wings. Shaking off the call, he joined Ethan in the first-class lounge, a sanctuary of leather armchairs, artisanal coffee stations, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the tarmac. The lounge was a haven of luxury, a stark contrast to the public areas. Soft jazz played overhead, and servers in crisp uniforms offered gourmet snacks, charcuterie boards, fresh fruit platters, and mini quiches that Ethan eyed hungrily. "Dad, this is awesome. It's like a fancy restaurant in the sky." On the ground, James ruffled his son's hair, settling into a plush seat with a copy of the Wall Street Journal. "Enjoy it, buddy. You've earned every bit of this with those straight A's." Ethan dove into a plate of pancakes, syrup glistening as he chattered about his school project on flight dynamics. "Did you know, Dad, that the Wright brothers failed hundreds of times before they got it right? That's like you starting Sky High." James's heart swelled with pride. Ethan wasn't just smart, he was resilient, absorbing the lessons James wove into their daily life. But beneath the joy, James harbored a quiet concern. In a world still grappling with racial inequity, lines about police brutality and corporate diversity quotas fresh in the news wanted Ethan prepared for the biases that might clip his wings. "That's right, son," James replied thoughtfully. "Failure's just turbulence. You adjust and keep climbing." As Ethan explored the lounge's kids' corner, fiddling with interactive flight simulators, James's mind wandered to the upcoming trip. New York promised Broadway shows, Central Park picnics, and maybe a visit to the intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum. But first, the flight, a simple journey that James hoped would teach Ethan independence. Meanwhile, across the country in the sun-drenched sprawl of Los Angeles, Vanessa Harper was wrapping up her morning routine in her upscale condo in Beverly Hills. At 42, Vanessa embodied the polished veneer of West Coast ambition, blonde highlights cascading over a designer blouse. Yoga-toned figure clad in slim-fit jeans and Louboutin heels that clicked authoritatively on her marble floors. Her two-bedroom unit overlooked the Hollywood Hills, a testament to her climb from middle-class roots in Orange County to a senior PR specialist at a boutique firm specializing in luxury brands. But Vanessa's success was laced with a rigid worldview of her upbringing, a conservative enclave where traditional values meant white picket fences, church on Sundays, and a healthy skepticism of anything smacking of woke culture. Born in 1983 to a real estate agent mother and a retired military father, Vanessa had absorbed the ethos of self-reliance and meritocracy from family barbecues and Fox News evenings. Her parents, staunch Republicans, had instilled in her a belief that hard work trumped handouts, often laced with casual comments about those people who gamed the system. College at USC had been a bubble of privilege where sorority life and internships at ad agencies reinforced her sense of entitlement. Now, scrolling through her Instagram feed filled with posts from influencers touting empowerment retreats and diversity seminars, Vanessa rolled her eyes. "All this PC nonsense," she muttered, liking a meme about reverse racism from a conservative account. Her own social media history was a trail of subtle jabs, shares of articles decrying affirmative action, complaints about forced diversity in Hollywood, and a recent post from a Trump rally she'd attended in 2024, captioned "Real Americans Standing Up Today." Vanessa was headed to New York for the annual PR summit at the Javits Center networking gold mine for schmoozing with execs from Vogue and Fortune. She zipped up her Louis Vuitton carry-on, packed with power suits, a tablet loaded with pitch decks, and a bottle of her favorite rose for the hotel minibar. "First class or bust," she declared to a reflection in the mirror, adjusting her oversized sunglasses. At $5,000 a year on elite status with various airlines, Vanessa viewed premium travel as her due, a perk of her earned status. Little did she know, her sense of superiority was about to collide with reality on a Chicago-bound flight that would reroute her life. Traffic on the 405 was a nightmare as always, but Vanessa's Tesla autopilot handled it with ease. She arrived at LAX with just enough time, breezing through the priority line at the sky-high check-in counter. The agent smiled politely. "Ms. Harper, your first-class seat on Flight 529 to New York via Chicago is confirmed. Have a wonderful journey." Vanessa nodded curtly, her mind already on the in-flight champagne. LAX, with its palm-fringed terminals and celebrity sightings, felt like an extension of her glamorous life. She posted a quick story on Instagram, "Off to conquer NYC. Boss babe first class life," tagging the airline for that sweet upgrade potential. Security was a breeze for her, clear membership and TSA pre-check meant no lines, no hassle. As she sipped a latte in the Admiral's Club Lounge equivalent for Sky High, Vanessa scrolled through emails, firing off responses to her team. "Make sure the diversity report is toned down. No one wants to hear about quotas," she typed to her junior assistant. Her worldview was black and white. Success came from grit, not grace, and anyone claiming otherwise was playing the victim card. Boarding her connecting flight to Chicago, Vanessa settled into her seat, oblivious to the irony that her path would soon cross with a father-son duo whose very existence challenged her assumptions. Back at O'Hare, the boarding call for Flight 529 rang out like a starting gun. Ladies and gentlemen, Sky High Airlines welcomes you to Flight 529 non-stop service to New York JFK. First-class passengers, please proceed to the gate. Ethan bounced on his toes, boarding pass in hand, while James guided him with a gentle hand on his back. The jet bridge hummed with anticipation, the faint roar of engines vibrating through the floor. They stepped aboard the wide-body Boeing 787, the cabin air-cool and inviting. Flight attendants greeted them with warm smiles. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Carter." "And young sir," Ethan's eyes widened at the sight of first-class spacious leather seats that reclined into beds, personal entertainment screens, and amenity kits wrapped in silk. "This is incredible. Dad." He claimed seat to A by the window, stowing his backpack overhead with James's help. James moved to 5B, a strategic distance to let Ethan savor the independence. "You've got this, son. Wave if you need anything." As the door closed and the safety demo began, Ethan peered out at the tarmac, the world shrinking below. Little did he know, the real drama was just boarding behind them. Vanessa Harper, striding down the aisle with her designer bag, her gaze landing on the empty armrest next to a young black boy who, in her mind, didn't quite fit the picture of first-class luxury. The plane taxied, engines whining to life, but the air in the cabin thickened with unspoken tensions. Turbulence, James knew, could come from anywhere, and it just the weather. A quiet indictment, echoing the struggles of generations, the cabin erupted in subtle reactions. Dorothy's pencil snapped in her grip, her whisper to the passenger beside her barely audible. "That boy's got more spine than half the adults I know." Michael leaned forward, his voice low but firm as he addressed Vanessa directly for the first time. "Ma'am, the child's right. Back off before this escalates." Rachel's recording continued, her free hand itching to comfort Ethan, but she held back, knowing intervention needed to be timed right. Whispers rippled through the rose phones, emerging like weapons, capturing the scene in high definition. Vanessa noticed the cameras, her cheeks flushing with a mix of annoyance and defiance. "They're all on my side, right? Standing up for standards." But the eyes staring back weren't supportive. They were accusatory, a jury already forming. Vanessa doubled down, shoving Ethan's backpack aside roughly to claim more space, the bag tumbling to the floor with a thud. "Oh, please, spare me the history lesson from a 10-year-old. Move, or I'll have to call the attendant myself." "This is ridiculous." Ethan's lower lip quivered, the near tears threatening to spill as he bent to retrieve his bag, but he straightened up without a sob, dignity intact. The push had crossed a linophysical now, not just verbaland. The cabin's tension peaked, passengers exchanging horrified glances. James, from his seat, caught the commotion, his tablet forgotten as he rose slightly, heart pounding. But he held back, watching his son stand firm. Just then, the lead flight attendant, Lisa Nguyen, a 33-year-old veteran with a warm smile honed from years of diffusing mid-air dramas, approached from the galley. Her uniform crisp and her expression a mask of professional calm. "Is everything all right here, folks?" she asked, her voice steady but eyes scanning the scene with practiced acuity. The question hung in the air, a lifeline amid the storm, as Vanessa turned to her with triumphant glee. "Finally, yes, there's a huge mistake. This boy is in my seat." Lisa Nguyen's approach to row 2 was measured, her years of experience on sky-high flights guiding her like a well-worn flight path. At 33, Lisa had seen it all. Irate passengers missing connections, mid-flight meltdowns over lost luggage, even a marriage proposal gone awry in the lavatory. But this felt different, a powder keg of prejudice masquerading as a seating dispute right there in the heart of first class. Her uniform, starched to perfection with the sky-high wings gleaming on her lapel, hid the knot of anxiety twisting in her stomach. As a first-generation Vietnamese American, Lisa knew the sting of bias all too well. Her parents had fled Saigon in 1975, only to face model minority expectations and subtle exclusions in their adopted California suburb. Now, as a flight attendant with a decade under her belt, she balanced diplomacy with duty. But threats to her job loomed large in an industry where customer complaints could derail careers faster than a delayed flight. The cabin's tension was palpable, a thick fog that made the recycled air feel heavier. Passengers leaned in subtly, their faces a mosaic of shock and anticipation. Dorothy Evans clutched her broken pencil like a talisman, her civil rights era resolve bubbling up as she whispered a silent prayer for the boy. Michael Liu's phone was already recording, his thumb hovering over the screen, capturing every word for potential HR escalation at his own company. Rachel Kim's video rolled quietly, her pediatrician's eye noting Ethan's subtle signs of distress the way his shoulders hunched ever so slightly, the rapid blink of his eyelids fighting back tears. And in the back, Jake Thompson, a 25-year-old TikTok influencer from Austin with 1 million followers in the travel niche, had his phone propped up on his knee, switching to live mode. "Y'all, something wild is going down in first class," he muttered into the camera, his southern drawl adding a folksy edge, Karen versus. Kids, stay tuned. Within seconds, viewers trickled in, 10, 50, 100. Jake's niche was airport drama, and this was gold. Vanessa Harper turned to Lisa with the fervor of a prosecutor spotting a friendly witness, her voice pitching up in exaggerated relief. "Finally, thank goodness you're here. There's a huge mistake if this young man is sitting in my seat, I always fly first class. You can check my status, it's probably some glitch in the system, or maybe a charity upgrade gone wrong. We need to sort this before takeoff," she gestured dismissively at Ethan, who stood awkwardly in the aisle, his backpack slung over one shoulder like a shield. The model plane now safely zipped into his bag. Vanessa's eyes darted around, seeking validation from the onlookers, but the stares she met were anything but supportive. Lisa nodded professionally, her smile a practiced veil of neutrality as she extended a hand for the boarding passes. "Of course, ma'am. Let's verify everything. If you'll both hand me your documents." Her tone was calm, the standard script for de-escalation, but inside, her mind raced. One wrong move and this blows up on social media. My performance review last quarter mentioned handling difficult passengers could tank it. Sky High's handbook was clear, prioritize safety and customer satisfaction, but discrimination complaints could lead to FAA investigations or worse, viral backlash that hurt the bottom line. Lisa had once been written up for a minor altercation with a drunk passenger. She couldn't afford another black mark. Ethan, ever the polite soul, handed over his pass first, his small fingers steady despite the tremor in his voice. "Here, ma'am, it's all correct. Ethan Carter, seat 2A, first class. My dad surprised me with it for getting straight A's this semester. I worked really hard on my science project about planes, and he said it was my reward." His words tumbled out, a heartfelt plea laced with the innocence of childhood achievement. For a moment, the cabin softened, Dorothy's eyes misted, remembering her own students' triumphs amid adversity. Michael nodded subtly, impressed by the kid's poise reminding him of his niece facing similar pressures in elementary school. Even Jake's live chat exploded, that kid's a legend. Gothan with hearts and thumbs up emojis flooding the screen. Viewers hit 500, comments pouring in, "Who's the bully lady? Fire her." Lisa scanned the pass with her tablet's scanner, the beep confirming legitimacy. "Everything checks out here, young man. This is indeed your seat." She turned to Vanessa, her expression expectant. "And Mom, may I see yours?" Vanessa fumbled in her toad with theatrical indignation, producing her boarding pass like it was a royal decree. Hooray, Vanessa Harper, elite status. "See, this has to be a mistake." Lisa's scanner beeped again, and her face remained impassive as she read the details. Internally, a sigh of relief mixed with dread. Seat 2 for C, economy, middle seat. Classic swap attempt? But escalating now. "Mum, your assigned seat is to for C in economy class." This gentleman's ticket is valid for 2A. I'm afraid there's no error. The words hung in the air like a verdict, and Vanessa's face contorted from smugness to outrage. She snatched back her pass, eyes bulging as if it had betrayed her. That's impossible. I booked first-class month's egg at thousands of dollars. This is a system glitch, or worse, one of those fake diversity initiatives your airline pushes to look good. You know, giving seats to people who don't qualify just for optics. The accusation landed like a grenade, the racial dog whistle clear to everyone. Lisa's cheeks flushed. As a woman of color in a service role, she'd heard variations of this before, passengers blaming quotas for their inconveniences. If this goes viral, it'll be my fault for not handling it faster, she thought, her mind flashing to her mortgage payments and her little brother's college fund. Sky High's post-9/11 security protocols meant zero tolerance for disruptions, but lawsuits from entitled flyers were a nightmare. Ma'am, our system is accurate. If you'd like, I can have the gate agent double-check once we're airborne, but you'll need to move to your assigned seat now. Vanessa wasn't having it. She planted herself more firmly into A, crossing her arms and raising her voice to a level that echoed through the cabin. No, this is outrageous. I'm calling my lawyer right now. He'll sue Sky High for discrimination against paying customers like me. You think you can bump a loyal flyer for some affirmative action stunt? I've got connections. My firm handles PR for half of LAS Elite. This will be all over the news. Her threats were a bluff, born of desperation, but they amped the drama. Jake's livestream surged to 1,200 viewers, comments raging. Sue. For what? Being racist. Cancel Skigerin and protect the kid. Dorothy leaned forward, her voice quivering with authority. Young lady, you're the one discriminating here. Sit down and behave or you'll regret it. Michael chimed in, his executive tone cutting sharp, threatening litigation over a valid ticket. That's harassment. Back off. Ethan, still standing in the aisle, felt the weight of the stairs like spotlights. His legs ached from the tension, but he drew on his dad's story as Thunderground Railroad, the Freedom Ritter to steady himself. Ma'am, he interjected softly, his voice cutting through the noise like a clear signal in static. I didn't ask for special treatment. I studied every night for those A's. My dad works really hard. He started his company from nothing, and this trip is for us to make memories. Please, just go to your seat. I promise I'm not trying to cause trouble. The sincerity in his plea was heartbreaking, a child's logic clashing with adult prejudice. Rachel Kim's heart twisted. She'd seen this in her young patient's resents masking deep hurt. She paused her recording to murmur, "You're doing great, kiddo," earning a fleeting smile from Ethan. From seat 5B, James Carter watched the unfolding scene with a father's agony and a CEO's calculation. His tablet lay forgotten on the tray table, merger notes blurring as his focus locked on Ethan. He's holding up better than I did at his age, James thought, pride warring with the urge to charge forward. Memories flooded him, that first corporate meeting where exec had dismissed him as the diversity hire or the investor pitch derailed by racial jokes. He'd risen above by staying composed, turning bias into fuel. But this was his sensmo, vulnerable, facing the world's ugliness too soon. James's hand clenched the armrest, knuckles whitening. Let him learn or step in now. If I intervene, does it teach dependence, but how much is too much? The internal battle raged, his executive training clashing with paternal instinct. He glanced at his watch, a Rolex Submariner, a symbol of his hard-won success, and calculated, takeoff in 10 minutes. One more moment. Ethan, show them your strength. Lisa, sensing the impasse, tried again, her voice firmer now. Ma'am, I must insist. We can't delay the flight. Please gather your things. I'll assist you to your seat, but Vanessa stood her ground, phone in hand, pretending to dial. I'm not moving until your supervisor comes. This is incompetency or worse, some woke agenda ruining real service. Get me the captain if you have to. The demand echoed, a gauntlet thrown. Jake's live hit 2,000 viewers, the chat a frenzy, captain incoming. "This is TV gold." Dorothy shook her head in disbelief, while Michael typed furiously on his phone, already drafting an email to Sky High's corporate. Rachel continued recording, her mandated reporter instincts kicking in. The cabin held its collective breath, the pre-takeoff hush amplifying every word. Lisa radioed quietly to the cockpit. "Captain, we have a situation in first-class passenger dispute escalating." James, overhearing the murmur, felt the scales tip. Enough, he decided, his resolve hardening. But before he could rise, Vanessa's voice peaked again. "I demand to speak to someone in charge." Now, from his vantage point in seat 5B, James Carter had a clear line of sight to the unfolding drama en route to. Though the partial divider between sections offered just enough obstruction to keep him from being immediately noticed. The first-class cabin, once a serene prelude to flight, had transformed into a theater of tension, with Vanessa's shrill demands bouncing off the curved walls like errant radar signals. James's tablet lay abandoned on the tray table, its screen frozen on a half-read email about the Delta merger, the glowing pixels now irrelevant. His focus was laser-sharp on Ethan, his son, his legacy, standing in the aisle like a young sentinel amid the storm. At 45, James had navigated boardrooms filled with sharks and skies riddled with thunderstorms, but nothing compared to the vice grip of paternal fear clenching his chest now. "Hold steady, son," he thought, his dark eyes narrowing as he watched Lisa Nguyen, the flight attendant, navigate the minefield with professional grace. "Show them what you're made of." James leaned back slightly, his custom-tailored Brooks Brothers suit shifting with the movement, the fabric whispering against the leather seat. He was no stranger to scenes like this. Prejudice had been a constant companion throughout his career, a shadow that lengthened with every milestone. Flashbacks assaulted him unbidden, pulling him back to the early days of Sky High. It was 2010, just 2 years after launch, and he'd pitched his expansion plan to a room full of venture capitalists in a stuffy Manhattan conference suite. The air reeked of expensive cologne and skepticism, the men in their pinstripes eyeing him like an anomaly. "Mr. Carter," one silver-haired investor had said, his voice dripping with false politeness, "your numbers are impressive for a startup. But let's be real, the aviation industry's a boys' club. Can you really handle the heat?" The subtext was clear. A black man from the South Side, in this. James had swallowed the bile rising in his throat, countering with data on underserved markets and his MIT credentials. But the contract went to a white competitor the next day. "Fit issues," the rejection email read. James had stared at it for hours in his dingy office, Elena's words echoing, "Rise above, son." He'd used that rejection as rocket fuel, securing alternative funding and doubling down on community routes that big airlines ignored. It was a win, but the scar remained a reminder that success didn't blind others to your skin. Another memory surfaced, sharper and more recent, the 2020 acquisition of a regional carrier in Atlanta. James had flown down for the signing, only to be pulled aside by the outgoing CEO, a good old boy from Georgia with a drawl thick as molasses. "James, you're a fine businessman," the man had said over cigars in the private lounge, "but some of my staff, they're old school. Might take time for them to adjust too. Well, the new face at the top, the implication hung like smoke, they won't take orders from you." James had nodded, masking his fury, and proceeded to overhaul the company with inclusive policies that boosted morale and profits. But the whispers follow anonymous complaints to HR about cultural shifts, leaks to the press questioning his aggressive style. He'd weathered it, emerging stronger, but each incident chipped away at the armor, leaving him hyper-vigilant about protecting Ethan from the same grind. "I built this empire so he wouldn't have to fight every inch," James reflected, his fingers drumming subtly on the armrest, "but life's not fair. He needs to learn that now before it blindsides him later." Pride swelled in James's chest as he observed Ethan's composure. The boy wasn't crumbling, he was standing taller, his voice soft carrying the clarity of conviction when he spoke to Lisa about his achievements. "Straight A's, science project. "That's my boy," James thought, a faint smile tugging at his lips despite the circumstances. Ethan had inherited his mother's intellect and his father's resilience, a potent combination James nurtured through their nightly rituals. But beneath the pride lurked worrying, annoying anxiety that twisted like turbulence. What if she touches him again? What if the words cut too deep? James's hand hovered near the call button, a silent debate raging in his mind. As CEO, he was accustomed to commanding rooms with a glance, issuing directives that moved mountains or at least fleets of planes. But as a father, especially a single one post-divorce, the lines blurred. The split from Sarah 5 years ago had been amicable on paper-irreconcilable differences. The lawyers called it, but the reality was a slow erosion from his endless travel and her rising career and education. "I can't raise a son with a ghost for a dad," she'd said during their last counseling session, tears streaming down her face. James had agreed, fighting for full custody to prove he could be both titan and tender. Now, co-parenting from afar, he poured everything into Ethan, weekend workshops on leadership, family game nights squeezed between flights, and those history lessons that doubled as life prep. Am I failing him by watching, or empowering him by waiting? The monologue looped in his head, an internal cockpit voice urging caution, protect without smothering. Let him fly solo, but be ready to catch. Around the cabin, the passengers' whispers built like a gathering storm, their support for Ethan coalescing into a subtle alliance. Dorothy Evans in 3B leaned toward her seatmate, a silver-haired professor type clutching a briefcase. "Can you believe that woman? Treating a child like that reminds me of the bus boycotts. We thought we'd come further," the professor nodded vigorously, his voice a hushed rumble. "It's appalling. The boy's handling it with more grace than she ever will." Their exchange rippled outward, drawing in Michael Liu from 1A, who pocketed his phone after a quick text to his wife, witnessing racism on flight. "Kid's a champ. We should back him up," Michael murmured to Rachel Kim across the aisle. Rachel, her medical journals forgotten, nodded fiercely. "Absolutely. As a doctor, I see the trauma this causes. Long-term effects on self-esteem. We can't let it slide." Her words, clinical yet compassionate, fueled the murmur, a wave of solidarity washing over the section. Even Jake Thompson, in 4C, muted his live for a moment to join the fray, whispering to a nearby businessman, "This is going viral, man." "The kid's the hero, she's toast." The businessman's eyes widened as he checked his own phone, pulling up Jake's stream. 3,500 viewers now, comments a torrent of outrage and encouragement. "Tell the truth," one read. "Protect Ethan," another. The digital chorus amplified the cabin's unease, turning passive observers into active witnesses. James caught snippets of the whispers, his executive ear attuned to the undercurrents of group dynamics. It was heartening these strangers, from diverse backgrounds, rallying around his son. Dorothy's civil rights fire, Michael's corporate solidarity, Rachel's medical empathy, Jake's social media savvy formed an impromptu jury, validating Ethan's dignity. But it also heightened James's internal conflict. They're supporting him, but at what cost? If this escalates to security, does it scar him or teach him the power of community? He thought back to his divorce mediation, the sterile conference room where Sarah's lawyer had grilled him on work-life balance. "Mr. Carter, how can you parent effectively when you're always in the sky?" the attorney had pressed. James had countered with evidence, Ethan's report cards, photos of their adventures. He'd won custody, but the doubt lingered, a personal turbulence he navigated daily. Single fatherhood meant being both parents' shield and sword, and moments like this tested that resolve. Sarah would intervene by now. He mused, a pang of what if hitting him, but I'm here. I choose patience for now. Vanessa's latest outburst, "Get me the captain," cut through the murmurs like a siren, pulling James fully into the present. Lisa's face paled slightly, her radio crackling with a response from the cockpit, but James saw the fear in her iced professional peril of a frontline worker. He respected that. Sky High's crew were his extended family, trained rigorously but human nonetheless. Ethan's response to Vanessa's threat was another beacon. "Ma'am, please don't make it a big deal. I just want to sit and look out the window like Dad planned." The plea was pure, underscoring the innocence at stake. James's heart ached. His son shouldn't have to plead for his place. The balance tipped. Enough watching, James decided, his decision crystallizing like a clear forecast after clouds. Pride in Ethan's strength was one thing, but no child should endure this alone. He unbuckled his seatbelt with deliberate calm, rising to his full 6'2" frame, his presence immediately commanding attention from nearby passengers. Dorothy caught his eye, nodding subtly as if sensing the shift. Michael straightened, ready to amplify. Rachel's recording continued, capturing the father's approach. Jake's live chat exploded. "Is that Dad? Here we go." James smoothed his jacket, channeling the quiet authority that had closed billion-dollar deals. Time to land this, he thought, stepping into the aisle. The cabin held its breath, the drama poised on the edge of revelation. The first-class cabin of Sky High Airlines Flight 529 was a pressure cooker. The air thick with the weight of Vanessa Harper's escalating demands, and the collective gaze of passengers turned witnesses. The hum of the Boeing 787's engines vibrated faintly through the floor, a reminder of the imminent takeoff, but the drama unfolding en route held the cabin hostage. Vanessa, entrenched in seat to A like a general claiming a hill, clutched her Louis Vuitton tote as if it were a shield, her voice rising to a crescendo that drowned out the pre-flight announcements. "I'm not moving until I speak to someone with actual authority," she snapped, her blonde bob swinging as she jabbed a manicured finger toward Lisa Nguyen. The flight attendant, caught in the crossfire, gripped her tablet with white-knuckled resolve, her professional mask fraying under the threat of a viral PR nightmare. Ethan Carter, still standing in the aisle, his small frame dwarfed by the towering tension, clutched his boarding pass like a lifeline, his brown eyes darting nervously but holding firm. "Ma'am, I just want to sit where I'm supposed to," he said softly, his words a quiet rebellion against the storm. From seat 5B, James Carter rose, his movement as deliberate as a pilot adjusting course in turbulence. At 45, he carried the gravitas of a man who'd built an empire from nothing, his tailored suit accentuating a presence that filled the cabin without a word. His Rolex Submariner glinted under the overhead lights, a subtle marker of his hard-won success, but it was his eyes dark, steady, and burning with controlled fire that commanded attention. The passengers nearest him sensed the shift, their whispers falling silent. Dorothy Evans, in 3B, straightened, her civil rights era instincts recognizing a moment of reckoning. Michael Yu, in 1A, paused his recording to nod subtly, as if acknowledging a general entering the battlefield. Rachel Kim, into C, kept her phone steady, capturing every second, her pediatrician's heart aching for Ethan but now sensing a tide turning. Jake Thompson's TikTok live surged past 5,000 viewers, the chat a frenzy of emojis and exclamations. "Who's the suit? This is about to pop off." Sky Justice, James stepped into the aisle, his polished loafers silent on the carpet, and placed a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder. The boy's tension eased instantly, his small frame leaning into his father's strength like a plane finding its glide path. "Ethan, you okay, champ?" James's voice was low, warm, but laced with an edge that hinted at the storm beneath. Ethan nodded, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "Yeah, Dad," she says, "this isn't my seat, but I showed her my ticket." She won't listen. The simplicity of his words, raw with a child's trust in fairness, cut through the cabin like a beacon. James's jaw tightened, his gaze locking onto Vanessa, who barely registered his approach, too consumed with her tirade. "Excuse me, ma'am," James said, his tone calm but resonant, the kind of voice that silenced boardrooms and steadied nervous crews. "You're sitting in my son's seat. I suggest you move to your assigned place so we can all get on with this flight." The words were polite, almost disarmingly so, but carried the weight of authority forged through decades of overcoming barriers. Vanessa's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing as she sized him up, a black man in a suit, exuding confidence she hadn't anticipated. For a moment, her bravado faltered, but her entitlement surged back like a wave. "And who are you to tell me what to do?" she shot back, her voice dripping with disdain. "This is a first-class issue, and I'm not dealing with some concerned bystander. I've already asked for the captain." Step aside. The racial subtext was unmistakable, her words slicing through the cabin's hush, drawing gasps from nearby passengers. James's smile was tight, a flicker of amusement masking the fire in his chest. He'd faced this before countless times, in fact. The venture capitalist who'd called him articulate as if it were a surprise, the airline exec who'd assumed he was staff rather than the CEO at a conference. Each slight had honed his ability to wield composure like a weapon, but this wasn't about him. It was about Ethan, standing there with his model plane tucked away, his dignity under siege. She's not just challenging a seat, she's challenging his right to exist here, James thought, his pulse quickening. He glanced at Lisa, who hovered nervously, her radio crackling with static from the cockpit. "Lisa," he said, his tone even but firm, no need to escalate further just yet. "I'll handle this." Lisa's eyes widened, recognizing the voice of authority, though she didn't yet know his identity. "Yes, sir," she replied, stepping back slightly, grateful for the reprieve. Vanessa scoffed, tossing her hair. "Handle it, you? I don't think so. I've got connections. Me firm works with people who'd eat your little airline for breakfast. Get me the captain, or this is going viral for all the wrong reasons." Her threat was a calculated jab, banking on her status to intimidate, but James was unmoved. He reached into his jacket pocket, retrieving his phone with the deliberate calm of a man who'd closed billion-dollar deals under pressure. "Very well," he said, his voice dropping to a velvet-edged steel. "Let's get someone with authority." He tapped a contact labeled Control and raised the phone to his ear, his eyes never leaving Vanessa's. "This is James Carter," he said into the device, his voice carrying across the cabin like a command from the cockpit. "I need Captain Johnson on the line, now. And have security prepped at the gate when we land." The words were simple, but their impact was seismic. Vanessa's smirk froze, a flicker of unease crossing her face as she processed the nomenclature and the casual authority in his tone. Passengers exchanged glances, sensing a shift. Dorothy murmured to her seatmate, "Carter. I know that name from somewhere." Michael Yu, ever the quick researcher, pulled up a Forbes article on his phone, his eyes widening as he read the headline, "James Carter, the Sky King. How Sky High Airlines redefined regional travel." "No way," he whispered, nudging Rachel. "That's the CEO." Jake's live stream exploded, hitting 7,000 viewers as comments poured in. "CEO Dad alert. Karen down, and this is better than Netflix." Jake leaned forward, whispering to his neighbor, "Yo, this dude owns the plane." The businessman beside him chuckled. Already searching James's name on X, where posts about Sky High's diversity initiatives were trending. Rachel's recording caught the moment perfectly, James's silhouette framed against the cabin lights, Ethan looking up at him with unwavering trust. The boy's small voice broke the silence, addressing Vanessa directly. "Ma'am, my dad's not just anybody. He works hard so I can be here. Please, just let me sit." The plea was heartbreakingly earnest, a child's last attempt at reason before the adults took over. Vanessa's confidence cracked further, but she doubled down, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "I don't care who you think you are. This is my seat, and I'm not moving for some kid or his pushy dad." The word pushy landed like a spark in dry grass, igniting murmurs of outrage. Dorothy stood partially, her voice cutting through. "Young lady, you're the one pushing a child out of his rightful place." "Have some shame," Michael added, his tone clipped. "You're harassing a minor. That's a legal line you don't want to cross." Rachel's eyes narrowed, her phone steady as she whispered to herself, "This is evidence for HR. Maybe even the FAA." The cabin door to the galley swung open, and Captain Amanda Johnson emerged, her presence commanding immediate attention. At 50, Amanda was a veteran pilot with 20 years of flying under her belt, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun, her captain's hat tucked under one arm. Her uniform was crisp, the 4 gold stripes on her epaulets gleaming like a badge of authority. She'd been briefed by Lisa via radio, but James's call had expedited her response. Amanda's career had begun in the Air Force, flying C-130s in Desert Storm, and she'd climbed the ranks in a male-dominated industry, earning respect with every perfect landing. She knew James' personnel not just as her boss, but as a mentor who'd championed women and minorities in aviation. Her eyes locked onto him, a subtle nod of recognition passing between them before she turned to the scene. "Mr. Carter," Amanda said, her voice steady and resonant, addressing James with the respect due a leader. "I understand there's an issue. I'm here to resolve it." The use of his name hit Vanessa like a gust of wind, her head snapping toward the captain. "Carter, who's this guy supposed to be?" she demanded, her bravado fraying as she sensed the tide turning. Amanda's gaze shifted to her, calm but unyielding. "Ma'am, I'm Captain Amanda Johnson. This is James Carter, CEO and majority shareholder of Sky High Airlines. You're occupying the seat assigned to his son, Ethan Carter, as verified by our crew. Your ticket is 42 for C and economy. I need you to move immediately, or will involve security and delay this flight." The revelation landed like a thunderclap. Vanessa's face drained of color, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "CEO'd," she stammered, her eyes darting between James, Ethan, and Amanda. The passengers erupted in a low buzz, phones capturing every angle. Dorothy's smile was triumphant, her whisper to her seatmate audible, "Knew he was someone big." "That's justice." Michael leaned back, his recording now redundant as Jake's live hit 10,000 viewers, the chat a wildfire. "She's done. CEO owns her. Sky High takedown." Rachel lowered her phone, a mix of relief and awe washing over her as she noted Ethan's small smile, pride in his father, untainted by the ordeal. James stepped closer, his voice low but piercing, addressing Vanessa directly. "You didn't need to know who I am to treat my son with respect. You chose to judge him based on your assumptious age, his skin, his place in this world. That's the real mistake here." His words were a scalpel cutting through her defenses. Ethan looked up, his eyes shining with a mix of gratitude and strength. "Dad's right," he added softly. "I just wanted to sit and see the clouds." The simplicity of his desire, contrasted with Vanessa's cruelty, silenced the cabin. Vanessa's hands trembled as she grabbed her tote, her defiance crumbling under the weight of her miscalculation. I didn't know," she muttered, but the excuse rang hollow. Amanda raised a hand, her authority absolute. "Ma'am, gather your belongings. You're moving to 2 for C now." The command was final, and the cabin waited, breathless, for Vanessa's next move. Chapter 7, Climax on the plane. The first-class cabin of Sky High Airlines Flight 529 teetered on the edge of chaos. The air charged with the electric hum of a confrontation reaching its breaking point. Vanessa Harper sat rigid in seat 2A, her hands clutching her Louis Vuitton tote like a lifeline, her face a mask of defiance now crumbling under the weight of Captain Amanda Johnson's words. The revelation that James Carter was not just a concerned father but the CEO of the airline had struck like a lightning bolt, leaving Vanessa pale and stammering. Around her, the passengers formed a silent jury, their phones a constellation of glowing screens capturing every moment. Dorothy Evans, her silver hair glinting under the cabin lights, leaned forward in 3B, her eyes blazing with the fire of a woman who'd seen too many injustices to stay quiet. Michael Yu, in 1A, had lowered his phone but kept his gaze locked on Vanessa, his corporate instincts sensing a reckoning. Rachel Kim, into C, paused her recording to whisper encouragement to Ethan, who stood in the aisle, his small frame anchored by his father's steady hand on his shoulder. Jake Thompson's TikTok livestream had exploded to 15,000 viewers. The chat a torrent of emojis and hashtags Karen crashed Sky Justice and CEO Dad for the win. The cabin, moments from takeoff, was no longer just a plane, it was a stage, and the curtain was rising on a moment of raw, unfiltered justice. Captain Amanda Johnson stood at the center of the storm, her for gold stripes gleaming with authority, her posture unyielding as she faced Vanessa. At 50, Amanda had navigated fighter jets through Desert Storm and commercial flights through corporate politics. She knew how to land a situation as deftly as a plane in crosswinds. Her voice, calm but ironclad, cut through the tension. "Miss Harper, I've confirmed with our crew, Seat 2A belongs to Ethan Carter. Your ticket is 4-2 for C in economy. You have 1 minute to gather your belongings and move, or I'll authorize security to escort you off this aircraft before we depart." The ultimatum was a gavel strike, echoing with the weight of FAA regulations and Sky High's zero-tolerance policy for disruptions. Amanda's eyes flicked briefly to James, a silent acknowledgement of his trust in her to handle this without his direct intervention yet. Vanessa's composure shattered, her face flushing crimson as the reality of her miscalculation sank in. "This is absurd," she shrieked, her voice cracking like thin ice. "You can't do this. I paid thousands for this flight. I'm an elite member, check my status. This is discrimination against loyal customers." Her words were a desperate volley, grasping at straws to salvage her crumbling narrative. She fumbled for her phone, scrolling frantically as if an email or app could rewrite her boarding pass. "I'll sue this airline. My firm handles PR for Fortune 500 company. I shall be buried in bad press." The threat, once her trump card, now sounded hollow, drowned out by the murmurs of disapproval rippling through the cabin. Dorothy's voice cut through, sharp and unyielding. "The only one discriminating here is you, young lady. Harassing a child, you're the disgrace," Michael added, his tone cold and precise. "Threatening litigation over a verified ticket is harassment, not a defense. You're done." Ethan, standing beside James, felt the weight of the moment like a gust of wind pushing against his small frame. His heart pounded, but his father's presence grounded him, a steady beacon in the storm. He clutched his backpack strap, the outline of his model plane pressing against the fabric, a reminder of why he was here, a reward for hard work, a gift from a father who believed in him. "Dad," he whispered, his voice barely audible over Vanessa's outburst, "I just wanted to sit by the window." The simplicity of his plea pierced James's heart, a reminder of the innocence at stake. James squeezed his son's shoulder, his voice low but resonant. "You will, champ. You're exactly where you belong." The words were a promise, not just to Ethan but to himself, a vow to protect his son's dignity without robbing him of his strength. Vanessa, sensing her control slipping, made a fatal misstep. In a surge of desperation, she stood abruptly, her tote bag swinging wildly and knocking Ethan's backpack to the floor with a thud. The boy flinched, stepping back as the bag's contents, a water bottle, a notebook, and his cherished Amelia Earhart biography, spilled across the aisle. "Move, kid," Vanessa snapped, her voice a raw edge of panic. "This is ridiculous. I'm not sitting in economy with the riffraff." The physical escalation, however minor, crossed a line. Gasps erupted from the passengers, phones zooming in like hawks. Rachel Kim's medical instincts kicked in. She leaned forward, her voice firm but calm. "Ma'am, you just physically displaced a child's belongings. That's assault in a confined space. Stop now." Her words, grounded in her experience with vulnerable patients, carried a weight that silenced Vanessa for a fleeting moment. James's restraint snapped. His eyes darkened, the CEO's composure giving way to a father's fury. He stepped forward, towering over Vanessa, his voice low and lethal. "You do not touch my son's things. You do not speak to him like that. Get up, now, or you'll regret testing me." The threat was controlled, no louder than a conversational tone, but it carried the weight of a man who'd built an empire from nothing and wasn't about to let a bully tarnish his son's moment. Vanessa froze, her hands trembling as she clutched her tote, realizing too late she'd misjudged her opponent. The cabin held its breath, the only sound the faint crackle of Lisa's radio as she relayed the situation to the cockpit. Amanda raised a hand, signaling for calm, but her gaze was locked on Vanessa. "Miss Harper, this is your final warning. Move to 2 for C, or you'll be removed from this flight and barred from Sky High Airlines. We don't tolerate harassment, especially not of a minor." Her words were backed by protocol, but also by personal conviction. Amanda had faced her own battles as a woman in aviation, enduring snide comments about her competence from male co-pilots early in her career. She glanced at Ethan, seeing in him the same resilience she'd needed to climb the ranks. "Young man," she added softly, "you're welcome here. This is your seat." The mention of removal was the final blow. Vanessa's bravado collapsed, her shoulders slumping as she grabbed her bags, muttering incoherently about unfair treatment and connections in high places, but her defiance was a facade now, crumbling under the weight of the cabin's collective judgment. As she stood, two security officers appeared from the galleys, summoned by Amanda's radio call. Both were imposing figures in navy blazers, their badges glinting under the cabin lights. The lead officer, a broad-shouldered man named Marcus, spoke with clipped authority. "Mum, step this way. We'll escort you to your assigned seat." His tone left no room for argument, and the sight of his handcuffs clipped to his belt underscored the stakes. Under FAA regulations, refusal to comply could lead to arrest upon landing, a fact not lost on Vanessa as her eyes darted nervously. In a last-ditch effort to save face, Vanessa tried to spin the narrative. "This is a setup," she cried, her voice shrill as she addressed the passengers. "You're all recording me, making me the villain when it's their fault for giving away my seat," but her plea fell on deaf ears. Jake's live stream hit 20,000 viewers, the chat a wildfire of condemnation. "Set up, you stole a kid's seat." Karen Onibus and CEO Dad is my hero. Dorothy stood fully now, her voice ringing with the authority of a lifetime spent fighting for justice. "Child, you made yourself the villain the moment you judged that boy by his skin. Sit down and learn something." The applause that followed was spontaneous, a wave of claps and murmurs rippling through the cabin, from Michael's approving nod to Rachel's relieved sigh. Ethan, emboldened by the support, picked up his scattered belongings with care, his small hands steady as he tucked his book back into his bag. James knelt beside him, helping silently, their eyes meeting in a wordless exchange of pride and relief. "You did good, son," James murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "You stood tall." Ethan managed a small smile, his courage shining through the ordeal. "Thanks, Dad. I just kept thinking about Grandma Elena's stories about not giving up your seat." The reference to his grandmother, a woman who'd passed down tales of resistance, brought a lump to James's throat. Vanessa, flanked by the security officers, was escorted down the Altord economy, her head bowed as the weight of her actions settled in. Passengers parted to let her pass, their stares a mix of pity and disdain. Jake followed her with his camera, narrating softly, "And there she goes, folks straight to 2 for C, middle seat city." The live stream chat erupted in laughter and clapping emojis, the digital world mirroring the cabin's verdict. Lisa followed behind, ensuring the transition was smooth, her relief palpable as the situation escalated without further disruption. As Vanessa disappeared into the economy section, the first-class cabin exhaled. Amanda addressed the passengers briefly, her voice projecting calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the disturbance. We'll be pushing back shortly." "Thank you for your patience." She nodded to James, a gesture of respect, before returning to the cockpit. James guided Ethan back to 2A, helping him settle into the seat that was rightfully his. The boy peered out the window, the tarmac gleaming under the morning sun, and whispered, "We're really flying, Dad." James smiled, his heart swelling. "Always, champ." "Always." The cabin erupted in applause again, this time for Ethan, a spontaneous ovation that echoed through the rows. Dorothy led the charge, her hands clapping fiercely, while Michael and Rachel joined in, their phones finally lowered. Jake's livestream captured the moment, the viewer count soaring past 25,000 as the plane taxied toward the runway. "That's how you handle business," he exclaimed into the camera. "Kid's a legend, Dad's a boss, and just took off." The chat agreed. Ethan rocks sky high winds as the engines roared to life. The cabin settled, but the story was far from over on the ground. In the cloud of social media, a storm was brewing and Vanessa's world was about to crash. The engines of Sky High Airlines Flight 5 to 9 roared to life, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the cabin as the Boeing 787 taxied toward the runway at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport. The first-class section, moments ago a battleground of prejudice and principle, settled into an uneasy calm, the air still thick with the aftershocks of the confrontation. The overhead lights dimmed slightly, signaling the imminent ascent, but the glow of phone screens lingered, a constellation of digital eyes that had witnessed justice unfold. Ethan Carter, now safely buckled into seat 2A, pressed his nose to the window, watching the tarmac blur as the plane picked up speed. His small hands gripped the armrests, not from fear of flying but from the lingering weight of Vanessa Harper's words. Yet, beneath that weight, a spark of triumph flickered. Head stood his ground, and the cabin's applause still echoed in his ears. James Carter, seated in 5B, leaned back in his leather chair, his tailored suit slightly rumpled from the tension of the past 20 minutes. His Rolex caught the light as he adjusted his seatbelt, a quiet reminder of the empire he'd built against all odds. But his focus wasn't on wealth or power, it was on Ethan, whose silhouette against the window was a portrait of resilience. "He's stronger than I was at 10, James thought, a mix of pride and pain tightening his chest. The confrontation had been a crucible, testing his son's mettle and his own restraint as a father. He'd wanted Ethan to face the world's unfairness head-on, to learn the Carter way stand tall, rise above, but watching his boy endure Vanessa's venom had nearly broken him. "I should have stepped in sooner," he admitted silently, though Ethan's poise had proven him right to wait. The boys' reference to Rosa Parks, drawn from their history nights, had been a gut punch, a reminder that the lessons James imparted weren't just stories, they were armor. As the plane climbed, the cabin tilting gently upward, James leaned forward, catching Ethan's eye. "You okay, champ?" he asked, his voice low, carrying the warmth of a father who'd just seen his son slay a dragon. Ethan turned, his brown eyes bright despite the ordeal. "Yeah, Dad, I'm okay. I just didn't expect that." His voice was soft, tinged with a vulnerability that made James's heart ache. "I kept thinking about what you and Grandma Elena said about not letting anyone take your place." James nodded, his smile bittersweet. "You did exactly that, Ethan. You held your seat, and not just the one on this plane. I'm proud of you." He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small Sky High Pina miniature version of the airline's logo and handed it to his son. "For courage under fire," he said, pinning it to Ethan's school uniform. Ethan beamed, tracing the pin's wings with his finger, the gesture anchoring him as the plane leveled off at cruising altitude. In the background, the cabin buzzed with subdued chatter, passengers processing the drama that had unfolded. Dorothy Evans, in 3B, leaned toward her seatmate, the professor, her voice a mix of awe and indignation. "That boy's got more spine than most adults I've known. Reminds me of the kids we marched for in 6-5, same fire, same dignity." The professor nodded, scribbling notes in his journal. Already planning to weave the incident into his next lecture on social justice, Michael Yu, in 1A, had resumed typing on his iPad, drafting an email to Sky High's corporate office commending their handling of the situation and subtly suggesting a diversity training overhaul. "If I'd faced that at 10, I'd have crumbled," he thought, reflecting on his own childhood navigating microaggressions as an Asian American in a mostly white school. Rachel Kim, into C, tucked her phone away, her pediatrician's instincts urging her to check on Ethan, but she held back, respecting the father-son moment unfolding. Instead, she jotted a note in her journal, monitor for signs of trauma in young patients post-confrontation. Ethan's resilience is remarkable, but follow-up needed. Jake Thompson in For C was the outlier, his TikTok livestreams still rolling, now at 30,000 viewers and climbing. "All right, y'all," he whispered into his phone, his southern drawl thick with excitement. "Karen's been sent to economy, and the kid's back in his seat." CEO Dad shut it down. "This is what justice looks like." The chat was a wildfire. Sky Justice trending, and give that boy a medal. Jake angled his phone to capture Ethan's silhouette against the window, careful not to invade his privacy too blatantly. His followers, a mix of travel enthusiasts and drama-hungry Genzers, flooded the comments with memes of Karens and clapping emojis. One user, at Flight Vibes, posted, "Sky High better comp that kid's whole trip." Another, at Justice Junkie, added, "This is why I fly Sky High, classy CEO, classy kid." Jake grinned, knowing this video would hit 1 million views by landing. Back in economy, Vanessa Harper slumped in seat 2 for C, wedged between a snoring businessman in a wrinkled suit and a college student blasting music through earbuds that leaked tinny beats. Her designer tote was crammed under the seat, her Louboutin heels scuffed from the hurried escort down the aisle. The humiliation burned hotter than the cabin's recycled air, her face flushed as she avoided eye contact with the passengers around her. "This can't be happening," she thought, her mind spiraling. "I'm Vanessa Harper, elite status flyer. I don't sit in middle seats." But the reality was undeniable. Her boarding pass, now crumpled in her hand, confirmed to foresee. She'd misread it in her rush at LAX, assuming her usual first-class upgrade had cleared. The mistake was hers, but admitting it felt like swallowing glass. Instead, her thoughts churned with rationalizations that kid didn't belong there. It was a glitch or some woke airline stunt. They'll pay for embarrassing me. Vanessa's phone buzzed in her lap, notifications piling up from her social circle colleagues, clients, even her sister in San Diego. She opened X, expecting sympathy, only to find a flood of mentions tagging her in Jake's livestream. "Is this you? At VANESSAH_PR. One user wrote, linking a clip of her rant. Another, Karenonibus vibes, why'd you go after a kid? Her stomach dropped as she scrolled, the hashtag Sky Justice already trending nationally with 50,000 posts and climbing. A grainy still of her pointing at Ethan was circulating, captioned, entitled PR exec tries to steal kid's seat, gets owned by CEO dad. Vanessa's hands shook as she muted her notifications, her mind racing to salvage her image. "I need to call my firm's lawyer when we land," she thought, but a deeper dread crept in. What if they see this first? In first class, the mood shifted as the plane reached cruising altitude. Lisa Nguyen circulated with a tray of drinks, her smile back in place but her eyes wary, knowing the incident could haunt her performance review. She paused by Ethan's seat, offering him a glass of orange juice. "You're a brave young man," she said softly, her voice carrying the warmth of someone who'd faced her own battles. "If you need anything, just let me know." Ethan smiled shyly, sipping the juice, the cold tang grounding him. "Thanks, ma'am. I'm just glad I can see the clouds now." Lisa's heart lifted. In her decade of flying, she'd rarely seen a child handle such pressure with such grace. James, watching the exchange, felt a surge of gratitude for the crew's professionalism. But his phone vibrated, pulling him back to reality. It was Rebecca, his CFO, texting, "Just saw a clip on Lynette trending on X, you okay? PR team's on alert." James sighed, knowing the merger talks would now compete with a media storm. He typed back, "Ethan's fine, that's what matters. Let PR spin it as a win for our values, diversity, integrity, all call from JFK." He glanced at Ethan, now flipping through the in-flight magazine, and made a mental note to shield him from the digital fallout. He doesn't need to see the internet's closet yet. The cabin settled into a fragile peace, the clink of glasses and rustle of pages replacing the earlier chaos. Dorothy struck up a conversation with Rachel, sharing stories of her civil rights marches, her voice a quiet hymn of hope. Michael emailed his contacts, urging Sky High to leverage the incident for positive branding. Jake's livestream dipped to 25,000 as some viewers dropped off, but the video was already being reposted across platforms from YouTube to Reddit. In economy, Vanessa stared at her phone, the screen now dark, her reflection a ghostly reminder of the reputation unraveling with every retweet. As the plane soared over the Midwest, clouds stretching like cotton below, James leaned forward, tapping Ethan's shoulder. "What do you say we plan our New York adventure? Statue of Liberty first, or pizza in Brooklyn?" Ethan's face lit up, the ordeal fading in the glow of his father's attention. "Pizza, Dad, and maybe the museum with the planes?" James chuckled, the sound a release of tension. "Deal. But first, tell me about that science project again." As Ethan launched into a detailed explanation of lift and drag, James listened, his heart anchoring to the boy who'd just faced a storm and come out flying. The Boeing 787 of Sky High Airlines Flight 5-9 sliced through the clouds at 35,000 feet. Its sleek fuselage a silent vessel carrying the aftermath of a confrontation that had already begun to ripple far beyond the confines of first class. Below, the patchwork of Midwest farmland stretched endlessly, oblivious to the digital tempest brewing in cyberspace. In C2A, Ethan Carter gazed out at the cottony clouds, his small hands tracing the edges of his sky-high pin, a gift from his father that gleamed with quiet pride. The ordeal with Vanessa Harper was fading into the background, replaced by the thrill of flying and the promise of New York adventures with his dad. James Carter, in 5B, sipped a black coffee, his mind split between Ethan's resilience and the buzz of his phone, which vibrated with updates from his PR team. The cabin, now settled into the hum of cruising altitude, bore the faint scars of the earlier clash whispers among passengers, the occasional glance toward Ethan, and the glow of screens as the story spread like wildfire across the internet. In economy, Vanessa Harper slumped in the purgatory of seat 2 for C, her designer tote wedged uncomfortably under the seat, her Louboutin heels pressed against a sticky floor. The snoring businessman to her left and the college students blaring earbuds to her right formed a claustrophobic cage, amplifying her humiliation. Her phone, once a tool of power for crafting corporate narratives, was now a ticking bomb of notifications. She'd muted X after the first wave of mentions, but the damage was done. Jake Thompson's TikTok livestream, now archived as a viral clip, had ballooned to 100,000 views before the plane even crossed into Ohio airspace. The hashtag SkyJustice was trending nationally, with 200,000 posts and climbing, a digital guillotine poised over Vanessa's carefully curated life. She dared to open X again, her thumb trembling as she scrolled through the onslaught. At Vanessa_PR thought she could bully a kid and walk away. Nope, Karen down read one post. Another, from at Flight Vibes, shared a meme of her pointing at Ethan, captioned, "When you try to steal a kid's seat and find out his dad's the CEO." Her stomach churned. The reality sinking in like a bad landing. She was no longer Vanessa Harper, PR elite, she was the internet's latest villain. The digital storm had started small but spread with the ferocity of a viral contagion. Jake's initial livestream, a raw capture of the confrontation, had been screen-recorded and cross-posted to YouTube, Reddit, and Instagram within minutes. By the time the plane hit cruising altitude, clips were circulating on every major platform, each with its own spin. A YouTube channel, Travel Takedowns, uploaded a 5-minute edit with dramatic music and captions entitled Karen vs. Courageous Kid, Sky High Showdown. It racked up 50,000 views in an hour. On Reddit's Our Public Freakout, a thread titled Racist Karen Tries to Steal Kid's First-Class Seat Gets Owned by CEO Dad had 10,000 upvotes, with users digging into Vanessa's online footprint. "Check her X history," one commenter wrote. She's been posting anti-diversity stuff for years, classic dog whistle vibes. Another linked to a 2024 tweet where Vanessa had liked a post mocking woke airlines, adding fuel to the fire. The internet, relentless and unforgiving, was peeling back her polished facade with surgical precision. Back in first class, the passengers were unaware of the full scale of the online maelstrom, but their own discussions kept the incident alive. Dorothy Evans in 3B leaned toward her seatmate, the professor, her voice low but fierce. "This is why we marched in the 60s, so kids like that boy wouldn't have to face this nonsense. But here we are, still fighting the same battles," the professor nodded, jotting in his journal. Case study, modern prejudice in confined spaces. Michael Yu, in 1A, was on his phone, not watching the clips but emailing his network colleagues at tech firms, diversity advocates urging them to amplify Sky High's handling of the situation. "This could be a turning point for airline PR," he typed. Showcase Carter's leadership and the kids' courage. Rachel Kim into C had switched from recording to researching, pulling up articles on the psychological impact of public shaming on children. "Ethan seems resilient," she noted, "but I'd recommend a counselor check-in post-flight." Her pediatrician's instincts wouldn't let her rest. She'd seen too many kids carry invisible scars from moments like these. Jake Thompson, in for C, was the epicenter of the digital quake. He'd ended his live stream but was now uploading snippets to Instagram and X, each post gaining traction. "Yo, this kid Ethan is a hero," he captioned a clip of Ethan's Rosa Parks reference, tagging Sky High and adding Sky Justice. His followers, a mix of travel buffs and drama enthusiasts, propelled the hashtag into the top 10 trends nationwide, with 300,000 posts by the time the plane crossed into Pennsylvania. Jake leaned back, grinning at his phone as notifications flooded in. "This is gonna hit 1 million views by tonight," he whispered to his seatmate, a businessman who nodded, already sharing the clip with his own network. "Sky High's gonna owe this kid a free trip or something," the man replied, half joking. Jake's posts weren't just content, they were a spark, igniting a broader conversation about race, privilege, and accountability in America's skies. Vanessa, in economy, felt the storm's full force. Her phone buzzed with an email from her firm's HR department, the subject line chilling, urgent, immediate review required. The message was curt: "Ms. Harper, we've been made aware of an incident involving you on Sky High Flight 5 to 9, as documented in widely circulated videos. This behavior is inconsistent with our values. You are suspended pending a full investigation. Please report to HR upon your return to Los Angeles." Vanessa's breath caught, her vision blurring as she reread the words, "suspended." Her firm, a boutique PR agency serving luxury brands, thrived on image. This was a death knell. She scrolled X again, finding her own profile flooded with comments, "Racist Karen alert." "And hope you enjoy economy for life," her sister's text popped up. "Ness, what did you do? Call me now." Vanessa's fingers froze over the reply button, her mind spiraling. Their twisting Thissy wasn't racist, just confused. It was a mistake. But the clips didn't lie. Her words, her tone, her pointing finger were damning, stripped of context in the court of public opinion. In first class, James's phone buzzed again, this time with a text from his PR director, Maya Torres. "Videos at 50OK views on YouTube alone. Sky Justice trending globally. We're drafting a statement emphasize your values, Ethan's courage, our zero-tolerance policy." James typed back, "Yes. Highlight Ethan's strength and our commitment to fairness. Keep it positive, no mudslinging." He glanced at Ethan, now sketching a plane in his notebook, oblivious to the digital firestorm. James's instinct was to shield him, but he knew the truth would surface eventually. He'll need to understand the world's watching, he thought, but not today. Instead, he leaned forward, tapping Ethan's shoulder. "What's that you're drawing, champ?" Ethan held up a sketch of a sleek jet, labeled Carter 1. "It's our plane, Dad, for when we fly together." James's smile softened the edges of his worrying. "Looks like a winner." Maybe we'll build it one day. The cabin's mood had shifted to a cautious optimism. Lisa Nguyen circulated with a tray of warm towels, her smile genuine now that the crisis had passed. She paused by Ethan, offering him a cookie from the galley. "For the bravest passenger on board," she said, winking. Ethan grinned, taking the treat. "Thanks, Ms. Lisa, you were pretty brave too." Lisa's laugh was a release, her earlier fears of a performance review fading. Dorothy struck up a conversation with Rachel, sharing stories of her activism, while Michael finalized his email, suggesting Sky High sponsor a scholarship in Ethan's name. The businessman next, Jake, now a convert to the cause, tweeted, "Proud to fly at Sky High Hair CEO James Carter and his son Ethan are class acts, Sky Justice." As the plane began its descent toward JFK, the digital storm showed no signs of slowing. Vanessa's firm issued a public statement on X. "We are aware of an incident involving an employee on Sky High Flight 5 to 9. We do not condone discrimination and are addressing this matter with urgency." The post garnered 10,000 likes, but the replies were brutal. "Fire her. And your employee's a disgrace." Vanessa, staring at the message, felt her world implode. Her clients' luxury brands sensitive to public perception were already distancing themselves, her inbox filling with "reassessing our partnership" emails. Her sister's second text was colder. "Mom's ashamed, Ness. Fix this." Vanessa's fingers hovered over her phone, a half-formed apology in her mind, but the words wouldn't come. "How do I spin this?" she wondered, the irony of a PR expert unable to control her own narrative biting deep. In first class, Ethan flipped to a new page in his notebook, sketching the New York skyline. James watched, his heart anchoring to the boy who'd faced a storm and emerged unbroken. The plane dipped through the clouds, JFK's lights twinkling below, a new chapter waiting. But the internet's verdict was still landing, and for Vanessa, the turbulence was just beginning. Chapter 10, Father-Son Journey. The wheels of Sky High Airlines Flight 5 to 9 kissed the tarmac at John F. Kennedy International Airport with a gentle thud, the Boeing 787 gliding to a stop under the late afternoon glow of a New York September sky. The first-class cabin exhaled, the tension of the earlier confrontation dissipating like clouds parted by the plane's wings. Ethan Carter, nestled in seat 2A, pressed his face against the window, his brown eyes wide as he took in the sprawling chaos of JAF taxiing planes, baggage carts darting like ants, and the distant Manhattan skyline shimmering against the horizon. The sky-high pin on his school uniform gleamed, a quiet badge of courage earned in the crucible of Vanessa Harper's prejudice. For the 10-year-old, the ordeal was already fading, overshadowed by the thrill of landing in a city he'd only seen in movies and his dad's stories. "Dad, look, I can see the Empire State Building," he exclaimed, his voice bubbling with excitement, the model plane in his backpack a silent companion to his dreams. James Carter, in seat 5B, unbuckled his seatbelt, his tailored suit slightly creased but his presence as commanding as ever. The weight of the incident lingered in his chest, a mix of pride in Ethan's resilience and a father's quiet fury at the world's persistent unfairness. His phone, tucked in his jacket pocket, had been buzzing non-stop since cruising, altitude texts from his PR team, alerts from X about the viral Sky Justice hashtag, and a missed call from a producer at Good Morning America sniffing out a story, but for now, James pushed it all aside. This trip was for Ethan, a father-son adventure to cement the lessons of courage and dignity that no classroom could teach. "You're right, champ," he said, leaning forward to share Ethan's view. "That's New York, all right, ready to conquer it." Ethan grinned, nodding vigorously. "Pizza first, then planes, right, Dad?" James chuckled, the sound a release of tension. "You got it." Brooklyn's calling. As the cabin door opened and passengers gathered their belongings, the first-class section buzzed with a subdued camaraderie. Dorothy Evans, in 3B, slipped her crossword puzzle into her bag, her silver hair catching the light as she smiled at Ethan. "Young man, you're a credit to your family," she said, her voice carrying the warmth of a grandmother who'd seen history's highs and lows. Ethan blushed, murmuring a shy "thank you, Mum, Michael you," in 1A, gave James a respectful nod as he packed his iPad, his email to Sky High's corporate already sent, proposing a diversity campaign centered on Ethan's story. Rachel Kim, into C, tucked her medical journals away, her mind still on Ethan's emotional resilience. She made a mental note to connect James with a child psychologist friend in New York. Just in case. Jake Thompson, in for C, was still glued to his phone. His latest ex posted a photo of Ethan's empty seat with the caption "Justice landed" into A. Sky Justice racking up 50,000 likes. The businessman next to him clapped James on the shoulder as they stood. "Hell of a kid you've got there, Carter. Hell of a company, too." James returned the gesture with a nod, guiding Ethan into the aisle with a gentle hand. The boy clutched his backpack, the weight of his model plane and Amelia Earhart biography grounding him. As they stepped onto the jet bridge, the cool, metallic air of JFK replaced the cabin's recycled hum, and Ethan's excitement surged. "Dad, can we go to that aircraft carrier museum you talked about, the one with the fighter jets?" James smiled, his heart lifting at the boy's untainted enthusiasm. "The Intrepid, it's on the list, champ. But first, we're checking into our hotel and grabbing some of that famous New York pizza." Ethan's eyes sparkled, the ordeal with Vanessa fading into the background like a distant storm cloud. The father-son duo emerged into JFK's Terminal 4, a whirlwind of travelers, neon signs, and the faint aroma of pretzels from an Auntie stand. James navigated the chaos with the ease of a man who'd spent half his life in airports, while Ethan bounced on his toes, soaking in every detail, flashing departure boards. The multilingual announcements, the taxi drivers shouting for fares outside. Their hotel, a sleek boutique in Midtown, was a short ride away, and James had splurged on a suite with a view of Central Park. As they climbed into a waiting Sky High branded of perks of being the boss, James's phone buzzed again. Maya Torres, his PR director, had sent an updated statement. "Sky High Airlines stands for dignity and fairness. We're proud of Ethan Carter's courage and our crew's professionalism on Flight 5 to 9. We're reviewing policies to ensure every passenger feels valued." It was already posted on X, garnering 100,000 likes and thousands of retweets, with comments praising James's leadership and Ethan's poise. "Smart move, Maya," James muttered, typing a quick approval. But he glanced at Ethan, sketching a jet in his notebook in the backseat, and decided to keep the digital noise at bay. "This trip's about us, not the internet." Their first stop after checking in was a hole-in-the-wall pizzeria in Brooklyn, recommended by James's old Mitt buddy who'd settled in the borough. The place, Joe's Pizza, was a slice of New York lore, greasy tables, checkered floors, and a line out the door despite the late hour. Ethan's eyes widened as a steaming pepperoni slice landed in front of him, the cheese stretching like a promise of indulgence. "This is better than Chicago pizza, Dad," he declared, earning a mock gasp from James. "Don't let Grandma Elena hear you say that, champ. She'd have us both grounded." They laughed, the sound blending with the chatter of locals and the clatter of plates, a moment of normalcy after the flight's chaos. Over dinner, James steered the conversation to Ethan's dreams. "So, tell me about this Carter 1 jet you're designing," he said, sipping a soda. Ethan launched into a detailed explanation: wing pans, fuel efficiency, even a kid-friendly cockpit, his hands waving animatedly. "Pizza forgotten." James listened, his heart swelling. This was why he'd fought for this life, for moments where his son could dream without limits. Later, at the Intrepid Sea, Air and Space Museum, Ethan was in his element. The decommissioned aircraft carrier, moored on the Hudson River, was a cathedral of aviation history, 14 Tomcats and Black Hawk helicopters gleaming under the sun. Ethan darted from exhibit to exhibit, reading plaques aloud, his voice echoing with facts about World War II fighters and NASA shuttles. James trailed behind, snapping photos, his CEO facade replaced by a father's quiet joy. At one point, Ethan paused before a display on the Tuskegee Airmen, the black pilots who defied racism to fly in World War II. "Dad, were they like you?" he asked, his eyes serious, fighting for their place. James knelt beside him, the weight of history heavy in his voice. "Exactly like that, Ethan. They proved they belonged in the sky, just like you proved you belonged in that seat today. It's not just about flying, it's about owning your space, no matter who tries to push you out." Ethan nodded, absorbing the lesson, his small hand clutching the sky-high pin. Back at the hotel, as night fell over Manhattan, James and Ethan sat on their suite's balcony, the city's lights twinkling like a second sky. Ethan, wrapped in a blanket, scribbled in his journal, a habit James had encouraged since he was 6. "What are you writing, champ?" James asked, settling into a chair with a glass of water. Ethan hesitated, then read aloud, "Today, I flew first class. Someone tried to take my seat, but I didn't let them. Dad says it's like what Rosa Parks didn't at giving up what's yours. I felt scared, but I stood up for myself. I think that's what courage is." James's throat tightened, his eyes misting as he reached over to ruffle Ethan's hair. "That's exactly what it is, son. You didn't just keep your seat, you showed the world who you are." Ethan smiled, closing his journal. "I'm glad you were there, Dad. But I think I could have handled it, even if you weren't." James laughed softly, pride swelling. "I know you could have, champ. But I'll always have your back." Meanwhile, James's phone buzzed with another update from Maya. "Sky Justice at 500,000 posts. GMA wants you and Ethan for a segment." "Thoughts?" James sighed, glancing at Ethan, now sketching the Intrepid's deck. "Not yet," he typed back. "This is his trip. I'll call tomorrow." The digital storm could wait. For now, it was just a father and son soaring together in a city that never slept, their bond stronger than any turbulence. Chapter 11, Vanessa's downfall. Vanessa Harper's world unraveled in the dim light of her Beverly Hills condo, the once pristine space now a cluttered reflection of her spiraling life. The flight from New York back to Los Angeles had been a descent into personal purgatory, her middle seat in economy a humiliating exile that mirrored her fall from grace. The Louis Vuitton tote, scuffed from being shoved under seat 2 for C, sat discarded in a corner, its contents spilling across the hardwood floor. Lipstick, a crumpled boarding pass, and the self-help book she'd never opened. The condo's floor-to-ceiling windows, usually a showcase for the glittering Hollywood Hills, now framed a gray dawn that felt like a judgment. Vanessa, still in the wrinkled Chanel blouse from the flight, sat hunched on her cream leather couch, her phone a ticking bomb of notifications she couldn't bear to face. The Sky Justice hashtag had exploded to over 1 million posts, her name and face plastered across X, TikTok, and every news outlet from CNN to TMZ. At 42, Vanessa Harper, once a rising star in LA's cutthroat PR world, was now the internet's pariah, her carefully curated life reduced to a meme. Karen tries to steal kid's seat. Gets owned by CEO Dad. The descent had begun the moment she landed at JFK, her phone buzzing with the HR email that suspended her pending investigation. By the time she'd navigated the airport, Cheo's head down to avoid the stares of passengers who'd seen the viral clip, her firm had issued a public statement. "We are deeply disappointed by the behavior of an employee on Sky High Flight 5-9. Discrimination has no place in our organization. We are taking immediate action." The post, pinned to the top of their X account, had 200,000 likes and a flood of comments. "Fire her, and your company's a joke if she's still employed." Vanessa's inbox overflowed with cancellations, clients like luxury skincare brands and boutique hotels pulling their contracts. Citing reputational risk, her sister, Claire, had texted a single line, "Mom's crying, Ness, you've shamed us all." The words stung worse than the public vitriol, a reminder of her conservative Orange County roots where family pride was paramount. Vanessa's first instinct was to fight back, to spin the narrative as she'd done for countless clients. She opened her laptop, fingers trembling as she drafted an apology. "I deeply regret any misunderstanding on Sky High Flight 5 to 9. My actions were not intended to offend, I was simply confused about my seating assignment." But as she reread it, the words felt hollow, a PR platitude that wouldn't survive the internet's scrutiny. She deleted the draft, her mind flashing to the moment she'd pointed at Ethan Carter, her voice dripping with entitlement. "First class isn't for people like you." The clip, now viewed 10 million times on YouTube, captured her sneer, her dismissive gesture, and Ethan's quiet dignity, a contrast that fueled the public's rage. "I wasn't racist," she told herself, the lie a flimsy shield. "I was stressed, jet-lagged, protecting my status." But the X-threads digging up her old posts, likes on anti-diversity rants, a retweet of a Make America Great Again rally painted a damning picture. The internet had declared her guilty, and there was no appeal. By midday, her firm's CEO called, his voice cold through the speakerphone. "Vanessa, the board met this morning. Your actions are indefensible. We're terminating your contract, effective immediately." She'd pleaded, her voice cracking. "It was a mistake. I didn't know who they were," but the line went dead and an email followed, formalizing her dismissal. Her social circle crumbled next. Friends from her USC sorority unfollowed her on Instagram, their group chat silent. Her golf club, an exclusive enclave in Malibu, emailed to revoke her membership, citing conduct unbecoming. Even her personal trainer canceled their sessions. Texting, "Can't be associated with this, sorry." Vanessa's isolation was complete, her condo a fortress now breached by her own hubris. She turned to her usual escape, wine. Pouring a glass of rose from the fridge, she scrolled X compulsively, each post a fresh wound. A viral thread by @Justice Junkie detailed her career. Vanessa Harper, 42, senior PR at Elite Strategies, known for pushing traditional values in client campaigns. Her ex-history shows years of dog whistle posts. No, she's exposed. The thread included screenshots of her likes, retweets, and a 2023 comment, "Diversity quotas are killing meritocracy." The replies were merciless. "She's toast and hope she enjoys unemployment." Vanessa's hands shook, the wine glass nearly slipping. How did they find all this? She wondered, unaware that the internet's sleuths had spent hours dissecting her digital footprint, their outrage fueled by Ethan's innocence and James Carter's quiet power. The fallout extended to her family. Her teenage daughter, Lily, a sophomore at a private LA high school, had seen the clips at school, her friends whispering as they watched. Lily's text was a dagger. "Mom, why'd you do that to a kid? Everyone hates me now." Vanessa's heart sank. Lily, her pride and joy, was collateral damage. She tried calling, but it went to voicemail, Lily's cheerful greeting a cruel contrast to the silence. Her ex-husband, Mark, a corporate lawyer who'd divorced her 3 years prior, emailed, "This is a new low, Vanessa. Lily's staying with me until you sort this out?" The loss of her daughter's trust cut deeper than any job or status, a wound no PR spin could heal. Desperate, Vanessa contacted her lawyer, a high-powered attorney who'd handled her divorce. "Can we sue Sky High for defamation? Or the kid's dad for escalating this?" she asked, her voice frantic. The lawyer's response was blunt. "Vanessa, the video shows you harassing a minor. Your own words, people like you are the problem, no case here. My advice: lay low and get help." The suggestion of therapy stung, but it planted a seed. Vanessa Googled crisis PR recovery, stumbling on articles about public apologies and redemption arcs. I could do that, she thought, imagining a tearful interview, a mea culpa to salvage her name. But as she drafted another apology, the words rang false. "I'm sorry if anyone was offended." No, the internet would shred it. She needed to face the truth, but truth was a mirror she wasn't ready to look into. Meanwhile, in New York, James and Ethan were cocooned in their Midtown hotel suite, the city's lights twinkling beyond their balcony. James had shielded Ethan from the online storm, keeping his son's phone off and focusing on their adventure, but the world was watching. Good Morning America's producer had left another voicemail, proposing a segment. Mr. Carter, your son's courage and your leadership are a story America needs. Can we book you for tomorrow? James hesitated, his instinct to protect Ethan clashing with the opportunity to amplify a message of dignity. He glanced at Ethan, asleep on the couch, his journal open to a sketch of the Intrepid's jets. Not yet, James decided, texting the producer, appreciate the offer, we'll consider after our trip. Vanessa's reckoning was far from over. Her condo's doorbell rang, a rare occurrence since her social circle had vanished. It was a delivery cease and desist letter from Sky High's legal team warning against any defamatory statements. Attached was a notice she was banned from all Sky High flights, a blow to her elite status lifestyle. She sank to the floor, the wine glass empty, her reflection in the window a ghost of the woman she'd been. Therapy. Her lawyer's suggestion loomed as a last resort. She Googled therapists Los Angeles racial bias, the search a tentative step toward accountability. Maybe I was wrong, she admitted, the thought raw and unfamiliar. But how do I fix this? The internet offered no redemption, only judgment, and Vanessa Harper, for the first time, faced a life without a script to spin. 6 months after the turbulence of Sky High Airlines Flight 5-9, the crisp March air of Chicago carried a hint of spring, a promise of renewal that mirrored the lives forever changed by that fateful day. The city's skyline gleamed under a pale sun, its towering spires a testament to ambition and resilience, qualities James Carter knew well. In the auditorium of Ethan's magnet school on the south side, a crowd of students, parents, and local reporters buzzed with anticipation. Ethan Carter, now 11, stood at a podium far too big for his small frame, his school uniform pressed and a sky-high pin gleaming on his lapel. His curly hair was neatly trimmed, and his brown eyes sparkled with a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before the flight. Today, he wasn't just a fifth grader, he was a guest speaker invited to share his story for the school's annual Diversity Day. The auditorium's walls, adorned with posters of civil rights icons Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., and now a framed article about Ethan, felt like a sanctuary, a place where courage was celebrated. James sat in the front row, his tailored suit a familiar armor, though his smile was softer now, unguarded. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind. The viral Sky Justice hashtag had catapulted Sky High Airlines into a beacon of corporate accountability, with James's leadership lauded in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. The incident had also reshaped his bond with Ethan, forging a deeper trust through shared trials. As Ethan cleared his throat and adjusted the microphone, James's heart swelled. "Good morning, everyone," Ethan began, his voice steady despite the sea of faces. "My name's Ethan Carter, and last year, something happened on a plane that taught me about standing up for what's right." The room hushed, students leaning forward, phones discreetly recording. Ethan recounted the confrontation with Vanessa Harper, with anger but with clarity, weaving in lessons from his father and grandmother about dignity and resilience. "My dad says courage isn't about not being scared, it's about doing what's right even when you are. And I learned that from people like Rosa Parks, who kept her seat, just like I kept mine." The applause was thunderous, students stomping their feet, teachers wiping tears. James clapped hardest, his eyes misting as he recalled their history nights where Elena's stories had planted seeds that bloomed in Ethan's speech. The boy stepped down, mobbed by classmates asking for high fives, his shy grin a mirror of the child who'd faced a storm and soared. Later, at a reception in the school gym, James fielded questions from reporters, his responses measured but powerful. "Ethan's story isn't just about a seat," he told a CNN correspondent. "It's about every kid who's ever been told they don't belong." Sky High stands for giving everyone a place to fly. The quote, tweeted live by a local journalist, went viral, adding to the 2 million Sky Justice posts now circulating. The media frenzy had peaked months earlier when James and Ethan appeared on Good Morning America. The segment, filmed in a sunlit New York studio, had been Ethan's first taste of the spotlight. Dressed in a blazer James had picked out, Ethan had charmed the hosts with his earnest recounting of the flight, ending with a quip, "I just wanted to see the clouds. But I guess I saw a little history too." The audience had laughed, then cheered, and the clip trended for weeks, cementing Ethan as a symbol of quiet courage. James had used the platform to announce a sky-high scholarship fund for underrepresented kids in STEM, naming it the Ethan Carter Scholars Program. Applications had poured in 3,000 in the first month each, a testament to the ripple effect of one boy's stand. Across the country, in a modest LA apartment far from her Beverly Hills condo, Vanessa Harper sat in a therapist's office. The sterile scent of lavender candles, a far cry from her former life of luxury. The past 6 months had stripped her bare, jobless, ostracized, and evicted from her upscale home after her firm's collapse and mounting legal fees. Her designer wardrobe was sold to cover rent, her Louboutins replaced by thrift store flats. Therapy, once a laughable suggestion, had become her lifeline, a twice-weekly ritual to confront the biases she'd buried under years of privilege. Dr. Elena Ruiz, a soft-spoken Latina with a knack for cutting through denial, guided Vanessa through the wreckage. "Why did you assume that boy didn't belong, Dr.?" Ruiz asked in their latest session, her pen poised over a notepad. Vanessa fidgeted, her hands twisting a tissue. I don't know. I saw him, young, black, and thought it was a mistake. I was wrong, okay? I've said it 100 times, but saying it wasn't enough." Vanessa's public apology, posted on X a month after the incident, had been met with skepticism. "I deeply regret my actions on Sky High Flight 5 to 9. I've enrolled in sensitivity training and am committed to growth." The post garnered 10,000 likes but twice as many scathing replies. "Too late, Karen, and you only regret getting caught." Her daughter, Lily, had moved permanently with her ex-husband. Their communication reduced to strained texts. Friends had vanished, her social media accounts deactivated under the weight of relentless trolling. Yet, in therapy, glimmers of change emerged. "I grew up hearing certain things," Vanessa admitted, her voice raw. "About who deserves what. I'm trying to unlearn it, Doctor." Ruiz nodded, assigning her to journal about privilege, a task Vanessa dreaded but tackled, her entries halting but honest. She'd found work at a small nonprofit, a far cry from her PR glory days managing social media for a community center in South LA. The pay was meager, the hours long, but the job forced her to face the communities she'd once dismissed. At a recent event, a black teenager had approached her, asking about her role. "You're that lady from the plane, right?" he'd said, not unkindly. Vanessa had braced for scorn, but he'd added, "You're here now." That something, the moment, small but seismic, was a step toward redemption, though Vanessa knew the road was long. "I can't undo it," she wrote in her journal, "but I can be better." Back in Chicago, James and Ethan boarded another sky-high flight, this time to Washington, D.C., for a STEM conference where Ethan was a youth panelist. The first-class cabin felt familiar, the crew greeting them like family. Lisa Nguyen, now promoted to lead attendant, slipped Ethan an extra cookie, winking, "For the VIP," she said. Ethan grinned, settling into his window seat, his journal open to a new sketch. A plane soaring over a city, labeled Hope. James watched, his heart full. The flight was smooth, the skies clear, a metaphor for the path they'd carved together. In an epilogue of sorts, Sky High's stock had risen 15% since the incident, fueled by a PR campaign that leaned into their values. The Ethan Carter Scholars Program funded 50 students in its first year with plans to expand. The Sky Justice hashtag faded from trends, but its impact lingered. Schools invited Ethan to speak. Companies studied Sky High's response as a case study in crisis management. And James became a reluctant icon for inclusive leadership. As the plane descended into D.C., Ethan looked out at the Capitol's dome, his voice soft. "Dad, do you think I made a difference?" James squeezed his hand, his voice steady. You didn't just make a difference, champ. You showed the world what it means to soar with dignity. The legacy of Flight 5 to 9 wasn't just a viral moment. It was a reminder that courage, whether in a child's stand or a father's restraint, could shift the skies. As the plane touched down, James and Ethan stepped into a future where every seat was earned not by status but by character. The saga of Sky High Airlines Flight 5 to 9 isn't just a story about a kid keeping his seat or a CEO dad dropping a mic moment. It's a mirror held up to all of us, reflecting the little choices we make every day. Picture this, you're at a coffee shop, someone cuts the line, and you're tempted to throw shade. Do you channel Vanessa Harper's inner Karen and make a scene, or do you take a breath, maybe even offer a smile like Ethan did with his quiet courage? In 2025, when X is buzzing with hot takes and TikTok can turn a bad day into a global roast, it's easy to let entitlement or snap judgments take the wheel. But here's the kicker, Ethan, a 10-year-old with a model plane and a heart full of history lessons, showed us that dignity doesn't need a loud voice, it just needs a spine. And let's be real, if a kid can stare down a PR exec with more attitude than a reality TV villain, we can probably handle our own daily turbulence without crashing and burning. The lesson, life's like a packed flight of Arians got their seat, their story, their right to be there. Judging someone by their appearance, age, or anything else is like trying to fly blindfolded. You're gonna crash and the internet's got receipts. So, next time you're tempted to assume someone doesn't belong, maybe ask yourself, am I about to star in my own viral fail, or can I be the one clapping for justice like those passengers? Oh, and if you're wondering how to keep up with stories that make you laugh, think, and cheer for the underdog, don't miss out. Head over to VN and Justice Stories and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want a front row seat for the next tale of triumph. So, tell me, what's a moment when you stood up for what's right or saw someone else do it? Drop it.